Welcome to the Carleena Show, where ordinary people share their hero's journey. I'm your host, Carleena Angwin, and this is episode 35 of the podcast. My guest today is Corbin Cabrera. Corbin was 13 years old when his father, Army Lieutenant Colonel David Cabrera, was killed by a Taliban suicide bomber in Afghanistan in 2011. 2 years later, Corbin discovered a program that connected other children who lost a parent in combat or the war at home. Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors, or TAPS, brings people together in D.C. each Memorial Day weekend to help kids connect, play games, and process their grief. A couple years later, Corbin would become a legacy mentor and start mentoring a little girl and her sister. If you enjoyed this episode, you may like the other episodes that highlight military families and veterans. For example, Episode 9, Army Veteran and Working Dog Trainer with Damian Barry. Episode 16, Ride for 22 and Veteran Suicide Awareness with Steve Exene. Episode 31, At Ease Soldier, a Vietnam veteran uses death with dignity, with widow Juanita Ramsey. Or Episode 34, with Navy SEAL and Transformers actor Remy Adeleke. On a personal note, I was a guest on the Peace Corps Revisited podcast last week. I discuss arriving in Panama the day before 9/11, working in a poultry cooperative, and killing over 500 scorpions with a machete. I'll link to this episode in the show notes. If you would like to support the Carleena Show podcast, tell your friends about it or leave a review on Apple Podcasts or YouTube. You can also follow the Carleena Show on Facebook and Instagram. And now I bring you Corbin Cabrera. Well, Corbin, I'm really excited to have you on the show. And
I'm glad to be here.
Well, good. So tell me a little bit about you, where you live, where you go to school, and just a little bit about what your role is at TAPS.
All right. Well, to start, I live in Bryan, College Station area. I'm going to school at Texas A&M University, following the family tradition on that one. And with TAPS, I just serve as a what we call a legacy mentor. So someone who has lost a family member, gone through the program, and is now mentoring the program for themselves.
Okay. So you said that you're fulfilling the tradition of going to A&M. Is there someone else in your family that went there?
So both of my parents graduated from A&M, along with one of my aunts and one of my uncles on my dad's side, and then one of my uncles on my mom's side. So yeah, we have a maroon blood kind of pumping through the body.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to your childhood and just tell me a couple memories you have of your father.
There's a whole list of them. Some of my favorite ones don't always translate to stories very well, but for example, he used to have an alarm on his phone, and so no matter what time of day it was, or no matter what he was doing at that time of day, on the weekends, he would drop whatever it was and call my sister and I to come, talk to us every chance we could, because sometimes the time zone just didn't work out, especially when he was in Germany. So he would call at that specific time so we could, call and talk to him, and he and I would talk on the phone for, on average, 2 to 3 hours. And it would be everything from telling stupid jokes that never made sense. I vividly remember a conversation where I was giving him why did the chicken cross the road joke, and he asked why, and I literally just spoke in gibberish for 5 minutes, and he acted like it was funny. At the time I thought it was funny.
That's funny. So tell me some other memories you have.
So we used to travel a lot. So one time we rented an RV and went from Beaumont. We picked up my cousin when he graduated high school, and then road tripped from Beaumont, Texas, all the way up to Washington State. We lived in Olympia at that point, so we just helped move into the new house. Um, we went to Europe with another one of my cousins when she graduated. Uh, if you notice a trend here, it's
Hmm.
because my father promised all of his nieces, nephews, and kids, if they graduated high school, he would take them on a trip, and it
Hmm.
would have to fit in the budget, and depending on where they were, changes the options. But when my cousin Megan graduated, he happened to be stationed in Germany, so we flew over there with Megan and touched down, and they got to explore 8 countries in 2 months.
Hmm. Wow.
Some of the best pictures of my dad's sister and I are from a trip to Paris we took, and all of us have those bright blue eyes, and
Hmm.
it looks really nice near the Eiffel Tower.
Yeah.
Um, but just like little things like that, we would take day trips with just my dad, my sister, and I, and we'd have whole family trips. So my little brothers, my stepmom, my cousin, all of us just going and doing just random adventures.
Yeah, yeah. Was there a time when he like helped you out when something wasn't, going right in your life, or you were upset about something? Is there a time when he sort of, helped you feel better, or help you process something?
Yeah, I mean, he was my person.
Mm-hmm.
So growing up, our family has always used the term, our person.
Mm-hmm.
There's always one person you're closest to, and for my sister it was my mom, and for me it was my dad. And so even though my parents had separated when I was very young, if anything went wrong, I was just ticked off the world, or no matter what it was, I could just shoot him a text or an email, or call him if he was available, and he would just talk me through it, kind of make jokes about it. Um, but in the way of like, hey, just cheer up. Like, it's nothing that's going to, change your life. It's just annoying in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, yes, those happen quite frequently, as a kid growing up, and, you don't always agree with your mom or your grandparents or your sister for that matter. So anytime I was just really annoyed, I could talk to him.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's kind of where that one stuck out.
Right. And was he in the military since you were born, or when did he join the military?
Yeah, I think he joined the military in 1996, so 2 years before I was born. I could be a little bit off on the year,
Hmm.
but ever since I was born, he was in the military.
Okay. And what type of work did he do?
He did a lot of social work, so everything, that you would think of a counselor, or um, he worked a lot with children, and at least later in his career,
Hmm.
and he taught as well, so he would teach psychology.
Hmm. Hmm. And he was in which branch of the
The
military?
Army,
He was in the Army. Okay.
yes.
Okay. And how many deployments did he have?
Um, Deployments that I can remember are the two.
Two.
He had one in Iraq in 2006, and then his final deployment in Afghanistan in 2011.
Okay. Okay. Um, so how old were you when he went to Afghanistan?
I was 13.
Okay. And before he left, tell me what those days or weeks were like.
So my sister and I found out when we went to visit my dad's stepmom over the summer,
Hmm.
and we got a babysitter for the little boys, and we went to a barbecue restaurant. And I remember us sitting there, and we knew like we were gonna hear about something. We just kind of weren't sure what it was. And my dad explained to my sister and I that um, one of the guys in the unit that was overseas got injured, and he volunteered to take up the spot. So that would shorten his deployment from a year-long deployment to about a 6-month deployment, and he wasn't going to be, in harm's way in any way, shape, or form, which was a lie because he talks his way into things, and that just kind of,
Hmm. Hmm.
one thing led to another. Um, but he very much stressed to us that he was going over there to kind of fill in the role that was needed.
Hmm.
And that way, since his numbers were already getting kind of high from the last deployment, he was going to get sent on another deployment soon.
Hmm.
He said, might as well take this one that's going to be shorter. And then, after that, we were we weren't happy with it. It's not like we could do much at the time. My sister was 12 and I was 13.
Hmm.
Uh, but he went to, I think it was Georgia, and went and did some training, and then went off to Afghanistan. But during that time, his schedule was very different, all the way from when he went to Georgia about a month before his deployment, and then to when he died. I think I got to send him one or two emails. Like, our schedules just did not ever correspond. Like, the only time he could call, I guess, was about 5 in the morning, and we're still in school, and there's only so much you can do in that situation. And so I sent him an email. I booted up our old computer at my mom's house, which took hour to turn on, and then another hour to connect to the internet. Good old fashioned. And I sent an email, and later I found out that email that I sent was the morning that he was killed. And so I had, I think, one more email conversation with him right before that. So it was hard because we didn't get to communicate for too long before he passed.
Right. And so before he left, you said that there's nothing really you could do about him leaving. So how long was he over there before you got the news?
I want to say he left in late August, early September maybe, so a month or 2 months. So he wasn't over there for very long before this happened. But
and then explain the day when you found out.
So funny enough, when the doorbell rang, I thought it was going to be a buddy of mine who was planning on coming over that day. He lived right down the street, so his parents would just drive him over, drop him off, and we'd hang out, play Mario Kart and whatnot. Well, I hadn't heard from him saying that he was on his way, so I texted him and I was like, "Hey, are you on your way?" And he was like, "No, we haven't left yet." I was like, "Huh." So me thinking I'm being sneaky, looked out my bedroom window, which had a clear view of the street, and I saw a silver car parked. And I was like, well, that's odd because, he doesn't even drive a silver car and whatever. And then the doorbell rang another time, and my mom was a little annoyed. She was like, oh, it's, somebody trying to sell something. They just saw you looking through the window. And we kind of, bickered about that a little bit. And I was like, no, I promise. Like, I was super sneaky about it. And then I think they rang the doorbell a few more times and they left. And I remember talking to my sister and just being like, yeah, that was really weird. Like, they stood there for an unusual amount of time, even if they knew we were home. My sister and I just start watching TV and hanging out, just waiting for the day to go on. And then my mom got a phone call. And it was from my stepmom, because my mom and stepmom were civil with each other for, that entire duration. My family did a very good job of keeping us out of anything that happened behind the scenes. And they're actually good friends now, but my stepmom called my mom to talk to her about it, and my mom hadn't heard the news, so she found out because of my stepmom. And then my sister and I used to, try to, like I said earlier, be sneaky and stuff. And so we heard something going on, and we walked to the back of the house, and my mom was crying, and my grandparents were on a cruise. So our first thought was that one of my grandparents died. And that hit us hard, and so my mom had shoot us off and close the door, and so my sister and I sat at the end of the hallway crying because we were thinking that one of our grandparents passed away. And then my mom came out and sat us down on the couch, and my mom was the one who had to break the news. And then about 30 minutes to an hour later or so, the people from the military came back and rang the doorbell again. At that point, we knew. So they came in. We went through the what you have to do. So it was a very emotional time, obviously, but we did not expect. We expected one news, which was already bad, and got news that was, nothing we could have expected. So we got blindsided by that one.
Wow.
And, it was an interesting day.
So what were the next few months or so like? I mean, did you continue going to school?
I skipped the the 3 days or so. At the time I was playing football, so my coaches, all sent me letters, and or called. My I was in band as well, so the band all signed a card and sent it to my house. Um, we had family and friends that started just bringing, you know, food and stuff over and sat with us. And that night I just sat down and I remember vividly watching Jeff Dunham, because I just needed something that wasn't life on the TV. But then I skipped the next few days of school. And I remember going back to school and just being me, which sounds weird, but in the sense of like, I didn't change how I acted. I just went to school and put on the same face I put on every day and was just like, all right, cool. Like, we're going to joke around. We're going to make jokes with this, make jokes with that. And that was it. Then there were a few, the upcoming months had funeral after reception after, uh, we saw a bunch of family we hadn't seen in a long time. And with all of the grief comes, particular family drama. And so, like, everything happened in that duration. But those 6 months, I mean, even now, are still just ones that I don't remember very well because there was so much going on. My 13-year-old head kind of just shut it out.
Right, right. And how long after that did you discover TAPS, or did TAPS become a part of your life? And what does TAPS stand for?
TAPS stands for Tragedy Assistance Program for Survivors. And I didn't find out about it. I think I found out about it a year and a half or so later. August came up to me, my stepmom, and was saying, hey, you should come do this. Like, it's really fun. You can room with, your brothers and I. I'd love to have you out here. And at first I was like, I don't need help. Like, this is stupid. This is just going to be us and me going to sit in a room to watch kids cry. Like, very much teenage boy saying screw feelings. And then finally I was like, you know what? I want to go because I want to go see my little brothers. I want to hang out, that it could be fun. And that was in my first year was 2014. So only I went because my sister did ballet for most of her life, and their reception or their recital, I think is what it's called, spring show, always happened on Memorial Day weekend, which is when TAPS occurs. And then my mom stayed behind, obviously, to support my sister. And I said, okay, well, I'm just gonna go do TAPS. And the first year, I kind of liked it. I thought it was all right. I made a few friends. I actually met my mentor and now, like, really good friend, Daniel, that year. He was not my mentor at the time, but I met him just because he was in the same age group as I was in. And he was mentoring a friend of mine. And then the next year I went, I hadn't talked to my first mentor at all. And Daniel became my mentor kind of from there on out. So Daniel was my mentor the next year. And then we had an excess number of mentors the next year, which was really good considering, we try to do a case or a mentee per mentor, a one-on-one basis. But a lot of times the older groups don't get to have that. The younger kids are prioritized on that list, and then it goes up by age group. So I actually got to hang out with a friend of mine, Liz, who's a wonderful woman. And, just throughout the years, I've gotten to gain friendships, and know people, and just have everything kind of go on top of each other. But no, I did not initially find TAPS or initially was open to TAPS.
So you said Daniel was who was your first mentor?
My first mentor, I don't remember his name off the top of my head.
Okay.
I had no contact with him after. It was kind of a lot. We have a lot of mentors that come in and they kind of hear what the kids have gone through and are going through, and it scares them for valid reasons. It's not the easiest thing to talk about.
And these are active duty? Are these active duty military, or are these veterans that are the mentors?
It can be both, but this particular guy was active duty.
Okay.
And so we see a lot of people that come in for 1 year and kind of get scared off.
Like
Because
how so? Like why? Like how do they get scared off?
um, our culture as a whole doesn't really like to talk about death.
Mm-hmm.
And so when when you have to hear, kids talk about it, it's a whole different kind of feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so how do you know how to handle that? If you don't even know how to talk to your friends or coworkers about something like that, how are you going to talk to a kid about that?
Mm-hmm.
I love that they're at least giving it a try.
Mm-hmm.
And the dude never made a promise to me of like, oh yes, I'll keep in touch, sure, I'll be here next year, or so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just happened to make connections with people who had been there for a few years.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and it's funny looking back at it now. Like I said, Daniel is one of my good friends. I'm
Mm-hmm.
friends with a lot of the mentors that were in that group that aged up as I aged up,
Mm-hmm.
and the mentees that have aged up. And so we now have this like little group, and
Mm-hmm.
we coined the phrase "Dead Dad Club" years and years ago, and we just
Mm-hmm.
have like a group chat and then a group Snapchat and stuff like that, and we all keep in touch, and it's just like a way to
Mm-hmm.
interact with those people on a regular basis.
So what sort of activities do they do where they kind of create an environment where kids can share and talk about death? What sort of activities do they have?
Uh, well, that's a really fun part about Taps, and I love it a lot. Is that it's not just that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they do a good job at mixing in. We have playtime, or we go outside and throw the ball around, or we play board games or Jenga, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then you rein it back in, and then there's some grief work that you do, depending on the ages, depends on the grief work.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, as kids get older, they start to talk about it a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're younger, you do arts and crafts, and that's just how they express themselves
Mm-hmm.
generally.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it always changes depending on the age range,
Mm-hmm.
and it changes on who your senior mentors are as well. We have senior mentors and group leaders that work together to make a curriculum and say, okay, hey, look, this is a good balance of fun activities and grief activities, and here's some ideas, and
Mm-hmm.
they bounce ideas off of each other to make each group different every year, while
Yeah.
also being as good as it can be.
Right, right. Can you give me an example of what an activity that delves into grief work, like what that looks like?
One of the things we did this year with the young kids, I mentored I think there were 7 and 8 year olds this year,
Mm-hmm.
and we read this book called The Color Monster, I think. Let me Google this real quick to make sure I'm talking about the right one.
Mm-hmm.
And basically, yes, it's called The Color Monster. And so the monster would change colors depending on the emotions that he felt. And then we used that analogy to stuff a water bottle, like a clear water bottle full of, they're called Orbeez.
Mm-hmm.
They're like the little beads that grow in the water.
Mm-hmm.
And so they filled those water bottles with Orbeez of different feelings that they felt.
Mm-hmm.
And that way they could, and we went around the room and they started sharing, like, oh, I put in a lot of these because I feel this, or, I put a mix of them because I just thought it looked cool. Whatever it is, and
Mm-hmm.
whatever way they want to express themselves, they can do it. And there's, the no judgment, the no holding back. No one's going to laugh at you for doing something one way.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you'd be surprised. There were, like I said, 7 and 8 year olds, and some of them sat there and filled this entire water bottle with just different colors. So they picked it between different Orbeez and did like 4 rows of blue Orbeez and then 4 rows of red, and they
Mm-hmm.
just put them in the color stacks so it would all be organized.
Right.
But it's just whichever way they want to express themselves, and that was one of the big ones this year that
Mm-hmm.
I thought went really well.
Mm-hmm. So the first year you went as a mentee, you were 14? Is that right? Eighth grade?
Uh, I would have been about in 2014. I would have been 15.
Okay, 15. Okay. And so after you went your first year, when you came back home, did you notice a difference, or did you like what were your feelings towards your first experience with TAPS?
I don't want to say I felt a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I met a lot of people,
Mm-hmm.
and the way that I work personally is I network a lot. So it wasn't a different experience for me having, having the ability to travel a lot as a kid and then coming back and just being like, oh, well, now I just know X amount of new people. So yes, it wasn't really a difference, but I kind of saw the opportunity to start meeting more people that were in similar situations, ask about, their experiences, and just have different friends that lived in different places, which I've always cherished. Like, yeah, it wasn't there was a change, so to speak, but I did know that I now had a different community, which we don't talk about sensitive or deep stuff too often, but especially when we started that group, we started a group message, I think, in 2015. The next year we went, and we started going to, Snowball Express is a different one that we went to, and the group of us still had connections. So we sent out a message in the group text and was like, hey, who's here? And we met up and hung out. And then as we went through high school, anytime something big happened in one of our lives, and even if it was emotional, like we would have these multiple hour long text messaging conversations between, at that time, it was only 6 of us. And so like I said, it was just a different type of community that was kind of reassuring to have.
Right. And the people in this group, they had all lost a parent?
Yes.
Okay. And what was the first year that you became a mentor?
2017 would have been the first year that I was a mentor.
And did you know who your mentee was before you went, or do you meet them when you get there?
Yeah, no, I had no clue who it was. I didn't even know what age range I was going to go for. And so the group that I was talking to you about before, we kind of said, hey, let's start with the young ones and let's age up with them. Because there's an age barrier where you can't mentor 13 and up unless you're 23, I think, or 25. I don't remember it off the top of my head. But and so we're like, if we start very young, we can age up with the kids if they choose to age up with us, and just kind of be there with them through their entire journey. Because a lot of us had that. I had Daniel for essentially 3 years. My friend Taylor had John for all of her years as she went. Thomas had Kevin, and so on and so forth. Like, we just had these people that were always with us, and so it was really cool to be able to give back in that same way and go back year after year. So I started it with the 5 and 6 year olds, which was terrifying. But it ended up, being a lot of fun. Different group leaders assign kids at different ways. Some of them just let things happen naturally. Some of them read off some of the intake sheets and say, hey, look, we have this person. Here's some key features. Is anyone particularly, aligned in the same interests? Because some of them want male mentors, some of them want female mentors, stuff like that. And so that's what we ended up doing that year. And I happened to get Brinley Thompson, who has been my mentee for 3 years now.
And you met her when she was how old?
When she was 5.
When she was 5. And so explain what it was like meeting her and having, like the first conversations with her.
Well, most kids at that age are pretty shy, especially after things that have happened in their life like this. And so it was more of she had to kind of get used to what was going to happen. And so you kind of you're there, you ask if they want to play games, and you just kind of wait to get a response, play games, draw, whatever they want to do. And eventually, the group of purple shirts, which are the legacy mentors, had all of our kids, running around with all the other kids. And at multiple points during the weekend, we were walking around with, as a human jungle gym, really. There's a picture from 2017 of me having one kid hanging off of each arm and then one kid on each leg as I was trying to walk. But it's a process. Just like when you meet someone new, you're not instantly trusting of them, especially if sensitive information. And so you kind of you don't pry, I guess. You kind of poke a little bit and you're just like, hey, where are you Like, where are you going to open up? And then you just let the relationship bloom as it will naturally. Just have to kind of give it the little head start because you only have 3 days.
Yeah. Do you think, the 5-year-olds, do they know why they're there?
Do they know?
Yeah. Like, do they?
Yes.
Okay.
Do they completely understand? Not always.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it's a case by case basis, I guess.
Right. And then, what is your relationship like after TAPS? Do you talk on the phone, or do you stay in touch, or how does that
So
work?
what I did was I gave Brinley's mom, Robin, my phone number, and I said, hey, if y'all like to talk throughout the year, I would love to hear from you. Robin gave me her number,
Mm-hmm.
um, and so I text them or call them occasionally. I try to do so at least a few times a year, just because I am interested in what they're doing in their life, and um, all three of them, Brinley, her mom, Robin, and her sister Ansley, are very close to me
Mm-hmm.
at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll talk to all of them now when I call them on the phone. And they all, we just kind of take turns at who gets to talk. And while I'm in college, it's a very busy schedule. Um, so last semester I was doing 15 hours plus work, and this semester I'm doing 19 hours. And I just kind of got to find time to be able to call. But it very much was one of those things where I said, hey, look, the door is open.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't want me to talk to y'all, just let me know. Like, I am not going to overstep my boundary.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But just showing the interest really kind of shows a lot.
Mm-hmm. And how has your relationship? Her name is Brinley.
Yes.
How has your relationship with Brinley changed over the past 3 years?
Well, at first she was kind of scared of me. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
gonna lie. I'm not a tiny dude, so um, it was, I guess, intimidating is the right word. Um, but now she'll see me and she calls me Corby, and she'll just scream it out and run towards me and give me a hug. And, now it's not just her; it's her and her sister, and I give them both hugs. Then I go to her mom and give her a hug. Um, but it's grown from this, I don't know who you are, to you know, I can kind of put up with you. You're fun to climb on and try to tackle and stuff like that. To, if she wants to talk about something, we'll talk about it. Whether it's anything from Barbies to sports to, who knows what else.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and I went and visited them in the spring. I was up before my stepmom moved down to Texas. I was up visiting her, and Brinley lives about, I think, 45 minutes away. So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, hey, August, can I take your car, go spend, a few hours? So I just drove out and got to hang out with the three of them and, you know, play. We played in the backyard a lot,
Mm-hmm.
and then went to Mod Pizza. So it's established, like I said, it's grown a lot and in ways that I can't even put into words,
Mm-hmm.
um, just to kind of see the excitement, I guess. You know, when she sees me or we get to talk about taps or, when she
Mm-hmm.
talks about her softball games and she just gets really excited. Now, like, I have been let into certain parts
Mm-hmm.
of her life that other people aren't allowed into.
Yeah. So do you talk to her about your experience and what you've been through?
Yeah, I mean, if it comes up and if she asks about it, I very much don't say, "Hey, look, well, when it happened to me, this is what I did." Like,
Mm-hmm.
I kind of, I take the passenger approach, and I'm just like, okay, you take me where you want to go in the conversation, if it ever, comes up, and then if she wants to hear about me, I'll tell her about me and what happened with me. But
Mm-hmm.
at this stage in her life, it's not really easy to empathize for somebody else who went through something similar.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure we'll talk about it more as the years go on. But
Mm-hmm.
for right now, I haven't told her a whole lot other than about certain feelings that I've gone through and stuff like that.
Right. Right. And how have you, as a person, how have you changed since you were 13?
Oh God, since I was 13 in just about every way. Um, so I think one of the biggest things is my ability to connect with people has skyrocketed. Um, I wasn't particularly bad at it when I was 13,
Mm-hmm.
um, but just kind of having the experiences that I've had, along with, and that's not just talking about my dad dying when I was young, but um, getting to mentor for TAPS, getting to go to different events with TAPS, and getting to make relationships with other organizations that are now like working with TAPS, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've gotten to meet people from all around the world and hang out with them and build relationships. And I think that that's one of the biggest ways that I've grown.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but also, just going through my own battles without TAPS, and then going through the certain things with TAPS, um, and then just like having the core group of connections that I've made.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know how to compartmentalize with certain things that happen in my life, and I'm like, okay, this is something that I can talk to my TAPS people about,
Mm-hmm.
or my friends that we've just known each other from TAPS, but we're friends on a much deeper level than that now.
Mm-hmm.
Or even just, I'm like, okay, like the average Joe can hear about, the crummy day at work, but the average Joe doesn't want to hear, oh, well, yesterday was the day of my dad's death, or like the anniversary of my dad's death kind of thing. And you're just like,
Mm-hmm.
well, we're just gonna kind of,
Right. Right. So, what are some myths that you think people carry about Gold Star families, um, or even the military in general?
Um, I mean, I don't know of any myths in particular. Um,
Or misunderstandings, I guess, would be better.
yeah, I think a lot of people just assume that with the military comes a certain form of, or a certain uh, like hardness,
Mm-hmm.
um, which isn't always true. Like I will say, it's a lot easier being raised in a military family to put on that face of, hey, look, nothing's going to affect me. But in the same time, that's a stigma that happens a lot with people in the military, and people are just like, oh yeah, they're fine.
Mm-hmm.
And we have, the whole suicide epidemic, which is
Mm-hmm.
becoming a more and more, known thing. So it's not so much a myth that's believed as much anymore, but it's still one of those hard things to take out of your subconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Especially when, a lot of the kids at TAPS are kids whose parents have uh, taken their own life.
Mm-hmm.
And um, there are, I don't know, I don't know of enough because I don't focus on other people's views of
Mm-hmm.
kind of what we do or what the military does as a whole.
Mm-hmm.
It's just been part of my life, and if someone doesn't agree with it, I'll sit down and have a conversation with them. But it's not worth kind of listening into the chatter of, oh
Yeah.
well, the military does this, the military does this kind of thing.
Right. Right. Um, what are your professional ambitions? Are you planning to join the military?
Um, I'm thinking about it.
Mm-hmm.
Even if I do, go in as an officer after I graduate,
Mm-hmm.
or I may do the reservist.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but that's a maybe. It kind of just depends on what I get offered after college.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, my end goal is to work with computers, in any form of the, or in any sense of the word. Um, I am a technology management major with a minor in business, and I'm about to apply for a minor in cybersecurity as well. I just love work. Networks are what I especially like,
Mm-hmm.
uh, dealing with computer systems. But eventually, that's what I want to shoot for, something in that industry.
Mm-hmm. And what year are you in college?
So I'm a senior in college,
Okay.
but I won't graduate until spring of 2021 because I switched my major,
Mm-hmm.
uh, you know,
Mm-hmm.
late as most people do. But
Yeah.
I thought it would be more worth my while to do something I really enjoyed than sitting in a different major and graduating early.
Right, right. And then what about your personal interests? Do you have any hobbies or anything that you enjoy doing?
I mean, that goes back to computers. I very much love computers. I've built my own computer. I've built quite a few of my friends' computers. Um, I I take after my father in the sense of the technology field.
Hmm.
I have a 3D printer going in the other room, printing off different models and stuff. Um, but outside of electronics and programming, I am known to be the guy who has all the animals. I have a dog and two cats sitting behind me, and I have a saltwater fish tank in the other room. Um, and
Hmm.
so those are where my main hobbies kind of rely. As most guys do, I do enjoy playing video games and
Hmm.
stuff like that. But if it doesn't have to do with electronics or animals, it kind of comes second.
Right.
Because you know, my room's the one decked out with the surround sound, the sound bar,
Yeah.
double monitors on my computer, the giant gaming PC. Like, if I can get my hands on something and just break it open, mess with it, try to make it better, and then put it back together, I'm all about it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, cool. So do you listen to podcasts? Is that um
I've
does
listened
your
to
generation?
Yeah, so I like podcasts a lot.
Hmm.
Depending on what I'm doing, kind of depends um, on what I listen to. I tend to listen to a lot of music as I'm zoning into uh, you know working on my computer or working through a new program.
Hmm.
Um, but on drives when I'm just driving by myself, which kind of happens a lot. I like to travel. I didn't mention that a second ago, but that's
Yeah.
one of them. And so if I'm really in the mood to focus and listen, I'll listen to one of my favorites is Art of Manliness. It just goes into a bunch of different topics, and they call in authors of different books and kind of breaks it down.
I listen to
Uh,
that. I listen to the Art of Manliness as well. That's so funny.
yeah, I love that podcast. And then there's a few more like some comedy ones that I listen to just to if I'm losing track of okay, well I have to focus on the road. It's getting kind of late. Put
Uh-huh.
on a comedy podcast, laugh a little bit. It helps keep me up and my blood pumping.
Right.
Uh, Murder mysteries are always fun ones.
Yeah.
So I've listened to like Serial and what's the other one? Up and Vanished.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
both very good crime podcasts. So it kind of just depends. I'll switch around.
Hmm.
And there's even some tech ones that I've listened to. And when I drove to California this summer, my buddy and I listened to a lot of the the alien and urban legend ones
Hmm.
when just driving through Arizona and New Mexico and
Yeah.
all that, and just be like, oh, okay, well,
Those are good
uh,
states to listen to alien podcasts.
yeah. And I showed him his whole thing on Skinwalkers and Skinwalker Ranch, and he was
Uh-huh.
like, wow. He's part Native American, so he's like, nope, nope, nope. I was like, hey, you wanted to listen to this kind of stuff? I'm all about this kind of stuff.
So how old are you?
I'm 21.
21. Okay, you are the youngest podcast guest
Oh,
on my
look at
show.
that.
So I know that's exciting.
I got to keep that record for at least a little bit. So you
Yeah.
got to at least promise me that for at least 3 episodes, you're not going to try to get somebody younger.
Oh, definitely not. I got a lot of old people coming on. Just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Older than me,
Older
younger
than
than somebody
you.
else.
Yes.
It's
Yes.
all relative, I suppose.
That's right. So, so do you have any other thoughts or reflections or anything else that you wanted to share?
No, I just appreciate the fact that I can, kind of share what TAPS is about and some of the work that, a lot of us do that I don't want to say it's overlooked, but it's not front page news worthy kind of thing. So
Hmm.
a lot of people don't know about programs like this.
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And I learned about it from your stepmom, August. Shout out to August. She's
Hey, if she's
been a
listening, love you, August.
yes, love you, August. I've known her for about 3 years now. She's great, and I learned about taps from talking to her. So, um, yeah. So, well, Corbin, it's been a pleasure talking to you
As
and
well.
and hearing your story and how you've, been impacted by, the mentors at TAPS, and then also impacted your mentees. And it sounds like you have a lifelong friendship. So,
Yes, yes, indeed.
yeah, yeah. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, and I wish you the best.
All right. Well, thank you for having me.
Alrighty, you take care.
All right, you too.
Bye.